Welcome into a new episode of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I am Dave Kluge with Football Guys, joined today by Bob Harris, and we are going to look ahead at next week. We've got a huge week coming up with free agency. Legal tampering starts on Monday. The season officially opens on Wednesday. Bob and I were doing this to kind of set the table because next Friday, we're going to be doing an episode kind of reacting to all of the big news. So, Bob, today we're going to guess, and then next week we'll react. I think this is a fun way to do this. But first question I have for you before we start jumping in player by player, what position do you think is going to be the most important to watch as we head into free agency next week?
I think, like everyone will always say quarterback because it's the most important position on the field NFL-wise. For our purposes, though, I think it's the running backs. There's some interesting wide receivers, but the running back position, there's a couple guys there that have pathways to being frontline players for us, and we'll be watching them closely.
And I think we know that running backs are heavily dictated by the workload that they receive.
Sure.
We see good running backs in bad positions, and we see bad running backs in good positions that can make them relevant in fantasy. So we'll talk about running backs at the very end of the show, but let's open up. You talked about quarterbacks, and there aren't a ton of quarterbacks available, but there are some desirable spots available. Let's start with Kyler Murray, the first guy we want to talk about here. I think a lot of people are talking about him potentially going to the Vikings because we have seen this reclamation project that they do up there, taking in these broken quarterbacks, fixing them, and then sending them on their way. But besides Minnesota, do you think there's a realistic landing spot for Kyler Murray that could help him potentially revive his career?
I think I think everyone's going to be interested in Kyler Murray for one reason. He's a $1.36 million contract, right? The Cardinals are paying, he's got $36 million guaranteed. So it's coming, that's coming on. So, I mean, I think
Russell Wilson, almost the same thing a few years ago. It's like you can get Russell Wilson for free because the Broncos already paid him.
Right. So I think that opens the door to, we're going to talk about Malik Willis because he's obviously the other name that's big, but, you're taking a gamble on him in terms of financial, and, there's uncertainty with both Murray and Willis, right? Murray, the health has not been great, but we've seen the upside. We've seen him produce at a super high level over extended periods of time. We can go back to 2022. He was a monster for our purposes, right? So he can be that guy, and he can be that guy for teams. So, I think everybody's open. I think the Vikings are open. I think there's probably a long list of teams that are going to be very interesting. Quarterback, the Jets. I think I looked at DraftKings, the early odds. The Vikings are the favorite. Jets are next. Dolphins. Jets are plus 175. Dolphins plus 320. Browns are plus 450. I think those are the teams. I do like the long shot, the Rams. I think that would be the greatest thing in the world for Kyler Murray to go sit behind Matthew Stafford with Cliff Kingsbury on the staff waiting around. And there's things, he could look back to Baker Mayfield kind of kicking off his reclamation or his resurrection, with the Rams. So we'll see. He'll be able to pick and choose. And there's some teams we think the Steelers and let's say even the Falcons might feel like they have things, figured out. Maybe they don't have them as figured out as they think. And maybe he'll be in play somewhere a little more surprising than the favorite spots. I'm with you. I think the Vikings make the most sense. Get them through a year and see if they don't get more. Maybe they'll make a different decision this time next year than the one they made this time last year.
So we've seen a lot of instances of quarterbacks drafted number one overall, showing some flashes with the team that they were drafted with, but never really becoming that franchise cornerstone guy, and then having much better second and third acts. I mean, I think about Jared Goff, playing better football in Detroit than I think we ever saw him playing in Los Angeles. You already talked about Baker Mayfield. Of course, we know Sam Darnold, not a first overall pick, but a highly drafted guy who has changed his career. Do you think that is something that we can expect with Kyler Murray now? I mean, it just feels like everybody has just kind of written him off because of the memes about his height and playing video games and all these sorts of things. But I don't know, when I see a guy with that skill set, still relatively young, I am hoping, and I don't want to say expecting because crazy things happen, but I really think that Kyler Murray, his story is far from over in the NFL.
I guarantee you NFL teams are thinking all those things you're thinking. I mean, this is this possibility. And then you layer on the recent successes of the reclamation projects that we've seen. And Matt Waldman, I channel my inner Waldman here. And I mean, he would tell you that none of these guys should be starting anytime. They should all be, given plenty of time to rise up and learn their trade. And, maybe Malik Willis has benefited from that a little bit. Right. And so yes, I think this is NFL is a copycat league. Teams see somebody have success. Who had more success than Seattle last year? Nobody. They did it with Sam Darnold, the reclamation project. We've seen him I think teams will be interested in Mac Jones, for that same reason, thinking that he's worked through the path. And often the path seems to lead through Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan.
Right.
And Kevin O'Connell can be part of that. I mean, but he is
Part of that tree.
right? Right. So I think there's a lot to be said there. I mean, you could say the same thing about the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield. They were part of that tree as well. So we'll see how it plays out. But to me, the thing about Murray is the questions are, we've seen the ACL, then last year we saw the ongoing foot injuries. Is he just hit that point where he can't hold up physically, right? That'll be the concern of teams, and it makes sense, especially for a running quarterback. That's going to be a big issue. Can he retain that mobility? Can he do the things that he did?
And a small running quarterback. This isn't a Josh Allen, Cam Newton type. This is a guy who plays like them, but doesn't have the same size.
But we're talking about a guy that was a rookie of the year in 2019. So for one of 5 players in NFL history, along with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and Cam Newton, to throw for more than 20,000 yards and run for 3,000 yards in their 7 seasons. I mean, he's thrown for 121 touchdowns, 60 interceptions. He has 32 rushing touchdowns, and he's going to cost you $1.5 million. He's gonna be employed and gainfully employed, and probably someone like I was looking. We have the early ADP data up at Football Guys. I think he's like, the uncertainty for sure is the big reason for it, but he's down in the 20s, lower end of the quarterback 2s, maybe right outside that, which is right for now. But as soon as he has a job, he immediately becomes a value. If you're out there in the best ball mean streets with me right now. Grab some shares of that while you can, but even if he rises up, will he rise up enough to reflect the true upside? I don't know. He'll still be available likely very late in leagues, just because there will still be some uncertainty, new home, health, all those questions. So he's definitely a player I'm super interested in watching.
And I think if he lands with Minnesota, that's the best case scenario. We've already seen that smoke there, getting to throw to Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison. I think then we could probably see him sneak into that like QB 12, maybe even as high as like QB 8 range in fantasy drafts. But if you're doing these early drafts right now, bet on the potential upside. He's almost assuredly going to be starting somewhere. Now, I'm glad you mentioned Mac Jones, because this is a weird when you look at the available quarterbacks. You've got Kyler Murray, who is essentially free. You've got Mac Jones, who would cost a first-round pick, we're hearing from San Francisco.
Sure.
And then you've got Malik Willis. $35 million is the number that we're hearing here. How much do you think Kyler Murray becoming available now has potentially impacted the Malik Willis asking price? Because I don't think that he's getting $35 million when you've got Kyler Murray available. I mean, there might have been a bidding war for some desperate teams, but I don't see that happening now.
Yeah, I don't see that happening either. The one team that would probably be the heaviest bidder for him, Miami, given the connections to the new head coach and the GM there. And they're obviously new, but they're going to be in the hole for $99 million to Tagovailoa. So that ties their hands to a degree. So I think probably the team that would be most interested in paying him is going to be not as interested. So I don't think he'll make as much money. But look, man, 11 appearances, 3 starts for the Packers. He's completed 78% of his passes, 976 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. Passer rating was 134. Has 261 rushing yards on 42 attempts. So I'm old enough to remember Matt Flynn, who took a very narrow band of production in Green Bay and turned it into a big contract. I think at the time was $15 million or something. Was a big contract with Seattle, and Russell Wilson shows up.
Job to Russell Wilson in training camp,
and kind of created a paradigm shift. The approach of, hey, get this rookie quarterback on a rookie contract and build around him. That's a path to success. So that was an interesting bit, but I think, somebody's going to take a chance on Willis, and maybe one of the teams we already mentioned. I mean, it's just like, it'll depend on the price, but I do think it's come down, but he will absolutely be one of the second quarterback, viewed this as the second quarterback in this class.
And with the rushing upside there, I don't know how you can't not be allured in fantasy football, especially if he's in an offense where he's throwing check down options to Devon Achane and, hitting Jalen Waddle on screen passes. I think Miami would be the really fun outcome here. So another guy right now that is falling quite a bit in these early best ball drafts that, it's just uncertainty. Like, people don't want to bet on uncertainty. As soon as these guys sign, even if they sign in like not great landing spots, just if they sign with
just
a chance to be a starter, they're going to move up. Yeah. So just take 100%. Advantage of that uncertainty discount right now if you can, because you're only getting it for a few more days.
And just to add to the reclamation kind of, arc here, Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur, the connection there. So the Cardinals, maybe they're in play there as well, but also the McVay tree. Another example of look, we can we could say maybe Malik Willis didn't get fair shots, prior to arrival in Green Bay, but we can also say, man, somebody coached the hell up out of that guy and got him to be a much better player than the guy we saw in Tennessee.
Another potential reclamation project. I think that's going to be the theme with a lot of the guys that we're talking about today. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the wide receivers. And obviously the guy that is the marquee free agent in this class, Alec Pierce, coming off of his best season. We know this guy's always been a downfield burner, a guy who can make contested catches. This year we saw him start to develop as a little bit more of a well-rounded receiver, pulled the highest target total of his career while still maintaining that very deep ADOT downfield. So, we've heard so much about his contract. Bob, do you think it's all but certain that he's going to command the biggest contract? Because we're hearing some rumors now that he's going to get $100 million plus in free agency next week.
Yes, he's going to get the most money for sure. He's the guy, and it's just going to be an answer point, and it makes sense. So, by the way, you talked about the more well-rounded. Over the past 2 years, he leads the NFL in yards per catch, receptions of 40 plus yards. He's got 12 of those, 21 yards per game, 21.3 yards per catch last season was the second highest mark by a player with 1,000 receiving yards since 2000, trails only Deshaun Jackson. So huge numbers. 2025, no other receiver averaged more than 18 yards per catch. So the gap was big. So it's just going to make him stand out all that much more. And somebody's going to take a chance on him. And a couple weeks ago, I wrote in the Fantasy Notebook, he might be a kind of market reset. I'm kind of dialing back on that a little bit. I don't think it'll be a total reset, but he's going to make a ton of money. I don't know if he'll hit 30 a year, but it's possible.
And we see this all the time. These guys that I don't want to like disparage his name at all. Like, he's a very, very good receiver, but we see, you don't get superstars hitting the free market. Like, these guys get traded, they get signed by the teams that they're with. So every year it seems like free agency opens up and these receivers like Christian Kirk at 70 million. And we're all just like, where did that come from? Because these guys don't hit the market and every team is looking for receivers. So I agree. He's going to get a lot of money. Next question I have for you. I have talked so much this offseason about how Alec Pierce would just be a perfect fit in Buffalo. I wonder if they're out of the running now after committing all this money to DJ Moore, trading a second-round pick for him yesterday. So now I'm wondering, what do you think is the best fit for Alec Pierce? What's the team that you would like to see him playing on?
Look, there's I think right now the Patriots are probably the leading team. There's the discussion, will they trade for AJ Brown? I don't know if anyone's trading for AJ Brown now that we see what DJ Moore's worth. AJ Brown, nobody has the resources now. I mean, whatever the Eagles were asking for, and it was a Quinnen Williams type deal, that's not going down any. So I think, the Colts are possible, and maybe they're able to re-sign him, and maybe we see Michael Pittman Jr. become a cap casualty at that point. So that's one possibility.
I just want to say that's something that I've talked about quite a bit. Didn't mean to cut you off here, Bob, but it just makes so much sense.
Sure.
They owe him $29 million, or they can release him and save 24 of that $29 million. So to me, I'm not running the Colts. I would much rather just eat $5 million in dead cap and use that money on Alec Pierce than paying Michael Pittman $29 million.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense to me as well. And he did mention, I think this week he acknowledged, he had a tight bond with Daniel Jones in the 10 months since they've been teammates. But also in his 4 years as a Colt, he's caught balls from 9 different starting quarterbacks. He would like a little more. He would like something a little more stable. So we'll see. And I think you talk about New England, where who that quarterback's going to be for a very long time. I think that makes sense. The Titans. I know that doesn't sound that appealing, but Cam Ward's not going anywhere for a while, I don't think, or at least and you go down there with Brian Dable and that offense and see what happens. That'd be interesting. The Raiders are going to be on the list of everybody looking at wide receivers as well.
And I like the Titans a lot just because Cam Ward is a gunslinger. Like, he likes to just chuck that ball downfield and have faith in his receiver to make a play on the ball. And Alec Pierce is one of the best receivers at making a play on a ball deep downfield. So I think that would be a lot of fun.
I'll regularly push on upside and be aggressive in chasing that. And what I saw of Cam Ward the last month of the season, he was a different Cam Ward. I'm interested.
I am very interested as well. Another wide receiver that we're hearing a lot of smoke about Tennessee is Wan'Dale Robinson. We're hearing that it sounds like it's kind of between the Giants and the Titans at this point, but this is one of the toughest players for me to get a read on. I loved Wan'Dale Robinson coming in out of Kentucky. If you saw that Citrus Bowl game, like he just completely dominated in his final college game, was off to a hot start in the NFL, and then he suffered the ACL tear. Coming back from the ACL, he was kind of relegated into this gimmicky role where he was an extension of the run game, catching the ball like 3 yards off the line of scrimmage. And then last year, we see him just get completely unlocked, looking like the player he was at Kentucky, winning downfield, winning intermediate routes, still getting those short, easy targets as well. So when I'm trying to look ahead at where he is going to play, I don't really know what to expect. How are we supposed to project a player like Wan'Dale Robinson when he does sign with a new team? Is he just going to be this gimmicky, gadgety player, or can he step up and be that versatile wide receiver one that can win all over?
Joined Malik Neighbors as the only 1,000-yard receivers in New York since 2019. What's he got, like 90 catches in each of the last 2 years? I mean, it's been a good run. I think your question is the right question. What will the real Wan'Dale Robinson please stand up? And maybe the answer is he can be both those things, and maybe more varied usage would serve him well. Maybe just a solid number 2 role. And I know, the Giants makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I think probably staying there is the best thing. I would throw in, though, like the Jets and the Commanders. The Commanders, he seems like he'd be a great fit. I don't think Deebo Samuels, they're moving on from Deebo Samuels. You need a guy opposite Terry McLaurin. You could say the same for the Jets, though, with Garrett Wilson. It's just, will they have the quarterback to make it work? But in Washington, you have a young quarterback ascending, we hope, when Jaden Daniels gets back on the field. So I think that's a possibility, too. Plus, you do something to hurt a divisional rival. I think that's a boss move for the Commanders if they could pull it off. But I think
you see that a lot in the NFC East, right? These teams kind of like signing old NFC East players, like taking jabs at the other teams in the NFC East. It's a very hostile division.
I think in the last year notwithstanding, you got 5'8", 185 pounds. There's going to be a lot of teams that just don't view him as anything more than a guy you throw to near the line of scrimmage and let him make plays, right? I think that's how he's probably going to be typecast last year notwithstanding.
And I think that you're in the right mindset. Like when you're talking about landing spots, you're talking about like this team has a good X receiver.
Right.
Like, when you're saying Terry McLaurin and Garrett Wilson and Malik Neighbors. And I think that's kind of, I like Wan'Dale Robinson a lot, but he's not a guy that I want to see on the Titans. Like, I don't think he should be the guy that you build the passing attack around. I think that he's the guy that, like, defense is focused on this guy. We've got Wan'Dale Robinson open in the flat. I think he's a very good player, but I almost do prefer to see him in a complementary role. But I could be wrong. And, the Giants like this guy a lot. They took him with an early second-round pick. We've seen him be productive through his career, but I think a lot of his production has come because there's nobody else to throw the ball to, or he's playing opposite Malik Neighbors. So a guy that I'm going to be very interested to see, and I think will surprise a lot of people. Everyone's talked about how much Alec Pierce is getting paid. Wouldn't surprise me if Wan'Dale Robinson ends up getting like 3 years, $70 million himself, just because that's the way the wide receiver market works. Yeah. Next thing I want to talk about, Rasheed Shaheed. The Raiders feel like such an obvious landing spot here, right? Like Rasheed Shaheed looked great with Clint Kubiak in New Orleans. Yes. Then he follows him up to Seattle. Now Kubiak is in Las Vegas. Assuming he does land with the Raiders, they don't really have a wide receiver one right now. How high would we be ranking Rasheed Shaheed in fantasy if he lands with the Raiders?
Higher than we should.
Probably.
I think there would be a lot of enthusiasm. I won't be surprised if he stays in Seattle. All right. I mean, when you look at the things he unlocked for Jackson Smith-Njigba, talking to the beat writers in Seattle, even before Shaheed was making an impact, which kind of started coming late in the running, the impact was there. I mean, safeties reacted totally differently. The things looked much different for Jackson Smith-Njigba with Rasheed Shaheed there. So no move might be the best move for him as well. But if not, it's the Raiders is the obvious move. I mean, like, he doesn't seem like a Jacoby Brissett. Like, there have been guys in the Raiders I would draft no matter what that are because they're right price. I think the price would rise higher than my expectations for him.
Yeah, right? And I think you're right. And I don't know how Rasheed Shaheed's skill set also fits with Fernando Mendoza. I think he kind of wants a possession receiver, a guy who can win on those back shoulder fades and whatnot. I don't know if Fernando Mendoza is a guy that wants to come in and immediately start ripping the ball 40 yards downfield and trying to hit Shaheed on these deep shots.
Well, Brock Bowers is always going to be the wide receiver one. So maybe, that doesn't, maybe that's just a benefit. Maybe it opens up some of the same doors for Bowers that Shaheed opened for Smith-Njigba. But Like, man, he's a big play threat. I would love to see him go somewhere where he gets more opportunities. Maybe he will get more opportunities in Seattle, as we saw late last season. Of course, new coordinator coming in. Again, same offense. It's the San Francisco offense, right? That Fleury's going to bring in there. So I don't know that there's going to be a huge shift. And we'll talk about some running backs I think might be a good fit for Seattle because of that. I mean, I just think probably he's staying home. But maybe somebody will overpay and hope he can rise up. I mean, that run in New Orleans was phenomenal, right? So,
Right.
People are going to look back on that and think that maybe they can recreate that.
My next guy that we want to talk about here, Romeo Doubs. And my question for you is really more of a take of my own that I'm just going to reshape into a question and ask you if you agree with me on this. Romeo Doubs, is he the most underrated wide receiver in this free agency class?
He might be, right? Like I think he's definitely been limited by a Green Bay offense that plays whack-a-mole wide receiver, right?
Yeah.
They don't care who the wide receiver one is. There's going to be someone every week who's open and he's going to get passes. He's been reliable, but I think the issue there is they've invested two of their top three picks last year in wide receivers, including Matthew Golden. They extended Christian Watson, who would have been a free agent, so. That kind of just seals Doubs' fate. And I do think he's a way better player. He had 55 catches, 724 yards last year. I mean, that's pretty solid. He can work in heavy traffic. He can, do great things. He might be the choice for the Las Vegas Raiders.
I think that would make a lot of sense. I think he can do a lot of the things that Jacoby Myers can do. And I'm looking right now. I mean, you talk about this whack-a-mole offense. Our friend Matt Harmon over at Reception Perception, when he charts how these guys are running routes, only 20% of Romeo Doubs's routes last year were vertical. Like most of what he's doing are just on these outs and digs. Like he just gets 10, 15 yards downfield, kind of finds that soft spot in the zone and catches the ball, but still just 25 years old. And I think he also thinks that he is a much better receiver than the way the Green Bay treated him. We heard, there was the suspension after the missed practices, and he has spoken out about his usage over the years. We saw that game coming back from the suspension, catches the touchdown, breaks down crying in the end zone. I don't want to say this guy is like an absolute stud wide receiver one, but I think that if you build a wide receiver room with weapons around him, he can be the top receiver in a good offense. So, like I said, still just 25 years old. I think he's going to be one of those guys who not only do we get the production from him, but also he does a lot of the dirty work that coaches really like.
Right.
He's a fantastic blocker. So when I think about the
100%
Raiders, I think that is such a good fit because Clint Kubiak asks his wide receivers to block, and Romeo Doubs does that very well. So I will be paying close attention to where he lands. A couple more guys I want to talk about at the wide receiver position. Darnell Mooney, that 1,000-yard season feels like it was ages ago at this point. Now we hear that the Atlanta Falcons are just releasing him, moving on from him. We can answer this one pretty quickly, I think. But do you think that his days as a fantasy relevant wide receiver are behind him?
Yes. I mean, like in Dynasty, he'll be on my rosters for the next 20 years, along with Josh Gordon and others who I'll never get rid of. But no, in all seriousness, I think probably so. I don't see him playing, a primary or secondary role, even probably more of a third receiver. And I think that makes it hard for us to get value out of him in fantasy.
Yeah, and time moves quick. Like Darnell Mooney is already going into his age 29 season. Yeah. That's not the end of a career by any means, but like it still feels like he's this young, promising guy that we're waiting to take that step forward. And all of a sudden, 29 years old. So it happens quick. Next guy we want to talk about, Juwan Jennings here. Sounds like he's not returning to San Francisco. Do you think that he can be fantasy relevant elsewhere? Or do you think that so much of his production just came from being a part of that offense where everybody was always hurt and he would just kind of get thrust into this wide receiver one role because they had nobody else?
But he's been very good at it, right? I mean, like he's been super effective, way more effective for fantasy investors than most people realize. As long as he's on the field, he's kind of beat up last year. Man, he's been phenomenal though, and I think he's not an alpha receiver. Like he's not going to get that treatment. He's not going to go somewhere where they view him as that. I know, again, to invoke the great Matt Waldman, but he's always talked about the Panthers needing somebody opposite Ted McMillan, and obviously they're going to keep Jalen Coker. I've seen it floated out there that maybe Xavier Legette would be available in a trade. They moved on from Jonathan Mingo pretty quickly. And maybe Jennings would be a good fit in that offense. Is not obviously the primary piece. So I think he'll be a supporting player, but he'll be one I watch because I like to have him every year. Depending on his landing spot, I might expect him to outperform expectations.
This next question I have for you, Bob, we're going to wrap up with the wide receivers here, and it's sad that we're talking about the some of the best names in fantasy football over the last decade, and I'm just going to lump them all together here. Talking about Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Debo Samuel. Of these four players, who do you think is most likely and least likely to put up top 24 production next year?
Mike Evans is the most likely. I
Yeah,
mean, Mike Evans is, the injuries last year notwithstanding, were not great, but he's been pretty good. I think we want to look at
so
the numbers.
163 yards in his first game back from injury last year. Like he just dominated.
2.3 yards per route run, ranks 14th among all wideouts over the past two seasons. I mean, he can still play. He can still be dominant. Last year, obviously, his first non-1,000-yard season in the NFL. I would be surprised if he's not it, and I would be surprised if he's not the guy who comes closest to making Alec Pierce money.
That is not. I think I bristled at first when I heard that, but yeah, I think like it'll be a shorter term contract. But
for sure,
he lands somewhere making 25 million, I don't think that would surprise anybody.
Right. I think that's the thing. And like you look at some of the teams that have like maybe a short term need, maybe San Francisco, maybe look, John Spytek knows him from their time together in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady does as well. Maybe the Raiders are the place, but where like to me, he's the guy who's most likely to be not named Alec Pierce to be a team's wide receiver one when the dust clears. So whether that's San Francisco, still need some help at that position. So I mean, I think there's some places where he could really excel, and I'm here for it. Patriots, if they miss out on the bigger money player, not out of the question either. I think Mike Evans still has a year. We'll see how that goes.
Removing Mike Evans from that conversation, we're now Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Debo Samuel. Who do you think is the least likely to be fantasy relevant of that bunch?
Tyreek Hill to me.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I hate to just like totally rule somebody out. I think Debo Samuel can continue Debo Samueling, which may not be great for us, but it's pretty good for NFL teams. Might be good at San Francisco, a return. Wouldn't be like, seems like it would make a little bit of sense there. Keenan Allen had most of his success in Los Angeles. Would that continue, somewhere else again?
He was almost in like a coaching role last year. Like he was hardly playing football out there.
It's true. So yeah, I'm like, I'm probably going with Debo there, just thinking he'll continue to have a solid NFL role. We'll see about the others. Tyreek Hill, though, I have the least confidence in. Although, like, if he came back and totally shocked me, I would love it.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen with Tyreek Hill is he's going to do like nothing all year, and then week 15, round one of the playoffs, that 6th seed is going to have Tyreek Hill, and he's going to have like a vintage 180-yard, 3-touchdown game and just completely blow up fantasy rosters. That's kind of my expectation for Tyreek Hill. All right, Bob, let's talk about some of the tight ends next. And not a ton of marquee names available at the tight end spot, but David Njoku probably leads the group here. What is the landing spot that would get you most excited for Njoku? Because it felt like his entire time in Cleveland, he was getting this frustrating inline usage, never really got fully unlocked as the pass catcher we wanted to see.
Well, let's pretend that Kate Otten is leaving Tampa Bay. I want to go with the connection to the quarterback he knows a little something about in Baker Mayfield. I think that'd be a fine landing spot for him there. I mean, I think there are others. There's a handful of tight end landing spots that are going to be worthwhile, but I think for him, that would be the one that I'd prefer.
And I guess another kind of question piggybacking off of this, assuming David Njoku is gone from Cleveland, is that a positive, negative, or neutral move for Harold Fannin, everybody's second favorite sophomore tight end?
I'd like to think it's neutral. I'd like to think Todd Monken watches film and understands the chess piece that he has in Harold Fannin, uses him kind of as a versatile kind of piece like that. And probably, like, I don't want to overstate the case, but not unlike Brock Bowers. I mean, it's, at the moment, it's hard not to view Harold Fannin as anything but the wide receiver one in Cleveland, right? So maybe that changes with new offense. We'll see what happens at quarterback. A lot of questions to be answered there, what the offense is going to look like. But we've seen, over the course of his time in college and the pros, Todd Monken knows what to do with tight ends. So I'm pretty bullish on Harold Fannin Jr.
So we talk about David Njoku probably not getting the best treatment in Cleveland and hoping that he can land somewhere in a better position. I feel like Dallas Goedert is the complete opposite. Like this guy was in a dream situation in Philadelphia, just kind of working as that underneath option, getting a lot of red zone usage. I do wonder a little bit that if he goes somewhere else, it's not going to be good for his long-term outlook. So is there a potential landing spot that would get you more excited about Dallas Goedert than you would have been if he stayed in Philly?
I don't know if they're more excited, but kind of equally or relatively excited. The NFC East beckons you, sir. Washington Commanders and New York Giants. I love Theo Johnson, but he hasn't quite gotten it done. But the Commanders have the whole, the Zach Ertz size hole in their offense. I don't know that Ben Sinot's ever going to happen. Sorry, Ben. And I think he'd be a great spot. That'd be a great spot for him. The Buccaneers also another spot for him. I think an overlooked spot for both Njoku and Goddard might be the Vikings. Does TJ Hawkinson become a cap casualty? If that's the case, they'll have an opening, and either of those guys would fit there nicely.
Yeah, I think somebody's going to overpay him just because he's coming off of all of
Sure.
those touchdowns last year. But it's we're seeing the league push heavy towards these multiple tight end sets, and I think the Dallas Goedert, even if he lands somewhere that already has a tight end, he can be that secondary piece, maybe the lead tight end. But we saw him early in his career playing opposite Zach Ertz and still being productive. Now the NFL focusing even more on tight ends. We don't need a guy to land in a spot where he's the only tight end there to find a path to fantasy relevance.
Correct.
So last guy we're going to talk about here, and I don't know if you have any insight here. Travis Kelce, is he playing in 2026? That's the only question I got here.
I think yes. He'll be back with Kansas City. The Eric Bieniemy hiring seems to have re-energized him. We'll see how excited he is. If he does play, I think it'll be for Kansas City. He won't make $17 million anymore. He'll make much less. But if he doesn't play there, I think that opens up to both the players we were just talking about, and maybe others might be interesting. I think Kate Otten and Chigakonkwo are going to probably get a lot more money than people expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, some of these unopened spots are currently unopened spots that might not be open. Those are going to be kind of the situations to watch. We're kind of focused on teams. Look, Denver, I don't know if Evan Ingram's ever going to be a thing.
Right.
I could see any of these guys landing there as well. So, but Kelce, it's Kansas City or nowhere.
I agree there. And some of these players, you just can't even picture in another uniform. And like Travis Kelce, don't leave the Chiefs. Like, just don't do that to your career. Like Mike Evans, yeah, he might sign somewhere else, but like I can't fathom seeing Mike Evans in anything besides a Bucs jersey. Sometimes I just want these guys to stay where they are, just so it doesn't look weird like Keenan Allen in a Bears jersey. Some things just don't work. All right, now we're going to talk about the meat of the show, what everybody wants to hear about the running backs. First guy we're going to talk about here, Ken Walker, of course, coming off the Super Bowl MVP. Can you envision Ken Walker in a true three-down workhorse role, Bob? Or do you think that he is just more of a complimentary running back?
Well, I can, because I did last year. I thought it was going to be fantastic. So clearly I did not have that one right. And we heard a lot of discussion, right? Clint Kubiak, saying he would be the guy. All the things we heard were fantastic. And it just turns out, availability is not his best ability. And it started, in the summer when he wasn't available for every fourth practice or something was his thing. And when you give guys opportunities at this level, they're likely to take advantage of it. Zach Charbonnet did. And so, and I mean, we could point to the 417 yards from scrimmage, 4 touchdowns in the postseason without Charbonnet. That's going to make a lot of people enthusiastic. Probably going to make him some money. I don't know that it's going to help us from a fantasy perspective. I will say, like 2 years ago, in Seattle, he was, I want to say, close to a running back one on a points per game basis, right? Mm-hmm. Just the number of games weren't there. So I think that's going to be the question for me. And the landing spot will be a bit of a question. But he's going to get paid, and he's going to get probably a decent landing spot and maybe a better opportunity. I think that it's telling in Seattle. Bill Barnwell had a number, even after Charbonnet was hurt, George Halani was on the field for 33% of the snaps in the Super Bowl, right? So, I don't know if anyone knows him better than the staff in Seattle, and so maybe they figured that out. But I mean, he's a big play waiting to happen. I think that's going to appeal to a lot of teams, maybe teams that have, another piece. Denver Broncos. It seems like an ideal landing spot. For him might work out well, where he's not asked to handle a load, but his breakaway ability and playmaking ability is clear. He'd like us to think he's a better pass receiver than the Seahawks thought he was.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe he'll get some more opportunities. He will remind you that he was a wide receiver in high school. I haven't seen a lot of it translate to this point, but maybe with more opportunities. But I think it plays expecting him to share carries. I think probably seems reasonable, and I think that doesn't like make him a non-play or not worthwhile. It's going to depend a lot on landing spot to me.
And I think I could do an entire show just talking about Ken Walker. Like we could have talked about him for an hour, and I'll try to keep my thoughts as tight as possible here. But I think there's sometimes this chasm between like what NFL teams want to see
Right.
and what fantasy managers want to see. And Ken Walker, yes, the explosive plays are so exciting, and like every once in a while he make these highlight plays where he's front flipping over a defender or doing something that we've never seen a guy do on an NFL field before. But the reality is he isn't good at mitigating losses, and he takes losses that can really just kill a drive. Like when you give the ball to Ken Walker on 1st and 10, he could end up putting you in a position where it is 2nd and 16. You're not getting that with Zach Charbonnet. Like, if you give the ball to Zach Charbonnet on 1st and 10, you're almost assured to be looking at worst at 2nd and 8, 2nd and 7. And I think that's it, is that like these big plays come at a cost, is that he's always seeking the big plays and he's trying to find the cutback lanes and he's trying to break tackles in the backfield. And that's something that a lot of NFL coaches don't want to live with. So I think that him being in a complementary role, you talk about Denver, I think that makes a ton of sense. Like bringing him in for the occasional, like keeping him fresh, allowing him to make those big plays. You also look, DeAndre Swift is a potential cap casualty in Chicago. I think pairing him with a guy like Kyle Monangai, where on early downs and near the goal line, they can rely on Monangai and his hard-headedness, where he's just going to get those 2-3 yards at a time, and then bringing Ken Walker in for the big play upside. But I think there's this hope that Ken Walker is just going to immediately be a 3-down back and that he's going to get signed to this massive contract. I also worry that some of his postseason run happened because he had fresh legs, because Zach Charbonnet, shouldered so much of the load during the regular season. So an interesting player to talk about. And I think that there's a lot of excitement for him. I don't know if the free agency excitement is going to match the fantasy and dynasty excitement.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And like I probably bought in more heavily than I should have in the notion that Seattle was going to lean on him in a featured role. I won't make that same mistake again. Maybe I'll overcorrect, right? Maybe I'm like seeing it, if teams are going to pay up, maybe they expect more out of him. I just think that big playability is going to keep him on the field, though. 33 carries at 10 more yards last year.
Yeah.
The more, though, coaches see that and see that big playability, you get some of those turning into 30-yard plays. It's not long before you're winning games.
And we've seen that some of the best running backs of all time, like Adrian Peterson, would take a ton of losses. And you'd see that, like he'd eat 3 yards and then he'd eat 4 yards and then he'd rip off a 75-yard touchdown. Like, we do have running backs that do play this way, and some coaches are willing to live with it and others aren't. Next guy we're going to talk about, though, Travis Etienne. And I think this is maybe one of another one of my spicier takes, I should say, about free agency. It wouldn't surprise me all that much if Travis Etienne gets just as much or more money than Ken Walker, because he does a lot of the little things that coaches like. He gets downfield quicker. He's a better pass catcher. Do you think that it would be completely out of the world of possibility that Travis Etienne ends up getting a bigger contract than Ken Walker?
He's the more proven commodity. I think that's the thing to me that makes him stand out. Aside from his, rookie season, he had the foot injury, but he's run for more than 1,000 yards in 3 of the next 4 years for our purposes. That's quarterback or running back 10 season last year, running back 3 season the year before, or 2 years before that. 2024 wasn't as great. But and we're all going to sit here and let's begin the wish casting now. Everybody join with me. Kansas City Chiefs could use a running back, by golly. Maybe Travis Etienne would be a great fit there. The Chiefs ranked 25th in the run last season. He's got the dual threat ability you mentioned. He'd be schemed and to handle screens and backfield releases by Andy Reid. That would be fantastic. So it would add a ton to their offense. He has 26 carries at 10 or more yards with Jacksonville. That's tied for 12th in the NFL last season. I just think this would be the spot to me, but there are other teams interested, I'm sure.
Yeah, as much as we'd love to see Jeremiah Love in Kansas City, they're probably going to have to trade up to make that happen. And I think getting Travis Etienne, plugging him in that offense, would be one of the more fun landing spots for sure. Something we can all get very excited about. A few more running backs we want to discuss here. Tyler Algier. Let's talk about some of the best case scenarios. We already talked about, Kansas City is a spot that we want to see a lot of these guys land in. I think Washington is another spot that we'd like to see some of these top running backs land in. How high could you see Tyler Algier finishing in fantasy if he gets one of these good backfields to himself?
How about if he gets Seattle?
Another one that we'd be excited about. Yes. And I
Right.
think
He's
that's
a
a
great
very
zone
good fit for the
runner. They're going to
offense.
run the zone. We don't know when Zach Charbonnet is going to be back. I think that, to me, that could lead him to something closer to what we would like. That might create some value there. A place where he could come in and get an immediate role. But yeah, I think he could. I think he could be a good complementary piece in a number of places. Denver would be another one. Where you could pair him up with RJ Harvey and, probably get similar kind of things. He's got a great nose for the end zone. So does Harvey. That might be appealing to the Broncos. I mean, the Broncos are going to need somebody. And I don't know if it's going to be J.K. Dobbins. We're going to talk about him. But I think for me right now, those would be the two spots that make the most sense for Tyler Algier to me.
And I think talking about the potential fantasy upside, I do want to just mention a little bit. This guy has been pretty much a zero in the passing game. Like even when he was the lead back his rookie season, he was still seeding a lot of passing down work. So I think he's one of those guys, again, like we talk about a lot of these players that are better for real life football than they are for fantasy football. And I think Tyler Algier could easily come in and handle 200, 250 carries in a backfield. But if he's not getting the pass catching upside and he doesn't have the elite breakaway speed as well, that does put a cap on him. So I think, regardless, even if he lands in a best case scenario, a good offense with a backfield that we assume he's going to be on top of, it's going to be really tough for me in any situation to push Tyler Algier inside my top 20, top 24 running backs just because of that lack of receiving upside. Next guy we want to talk about, Rachaad White. And this is a guy, kind of the opposite of Tyler Algier. Might not be able to handle 300 touches in a season, but does catch the ball a lot. We like that in fantasy. So 2 years removed from being an RB1. He had 1,000 yards 2 years ago as well. Efficiency metrics are trending in the right way. The big knock on him when he had his RB1 season was, well, the efficiency isn't great. Increases broken tackle rate, increases breakaway run rate, increases EPA in each of the last 3 seasons. So why does it seem like nobody's really talking about Rachaad White, Bob? Am I just crazy here? Because I think he's a pretty good running back.
You know who's probably talking about him is Liam Cohen.
Right.
Pairing him up with Bashal Tootin. I know Quinn Allen is a guy that can handle the receiving. That's what he's there for. But this makes perfect sense. We're talking about a guy with like 50 catches and 1,000 scrimmage yards. I mean, and pretty good nose for the end zone. I think he'd be that'd be a nice landing spot to me for him. But I think other teams should probably be interested as well.
And I think another team that would make a lot of sense would be the Washington Commanders.
Sure.
Another team that we have talked
100%.
about potentially looking for. And they played together. Jaden Daniels and Rachaad White, they played together for a couple of years in college. So they've got that connection as well. Another one that would be a lot of fun.
I think the Commanders, we should probably stipulate right now, or should need to be in the mix for just about everyone available. They definitely need a body. The Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the bill never came due. And showed flashes, but I don't know, and I know people there was a ton of hype on him last summer. And I think the person who led that hype train, Ben Standig, I talked to him in the middle of the season and his view was if they had all the pieces, he would be doing better. I think that's a fair argument, but I don't think it's an argument the Commanders are gonna say, yeah, that's what we think too. They're gonna go out and get a piece. And so all the guys we're talking about, I think we should frame as being potential for Washington. And the Giants have been talked about a lot as well. But they just added, re-signed Devin Singletary. So I'm not, there was a lot of talk about them pushing for Kenneth Walker or Jeremiah. I mean, talk about going all in at the running back position. And I don't know what that says about Cam Skadaboo's recovery. I thought it was going well. Sounds like he'll be ready for OTA. So we'll see what's up with that. I thought he served them quite well last season.
So I'll give the listeners a little sneak peek at Monday's show. I'm going to have Joey Wright joining me, and what we're doing is talking about all of the best landing spots and kind of ranking those, Washington RB1, Kansas City RB1, things of that nature. I think that the Washington running back landing spot is a better landing spot than the Kansas City one that everybody's drooling over, because we've seen Andy Reid, he wants to have this committee approach. There's always going to be guys coming in at the goal line, guys coming in on passing downs, where I think Dan Quinn, what we've seen from him historically, he hasn't had that guy in Washington. But I think if he has a running back he can lean on, he wants to lean on him. And then you pair up a running back in a backfield with Jaden Daniels. That's just a nightmare for NFL defenses to have to focus on. So I get really excited about whoever is going to land in Washington. And I think that might end up being Rachaad White. Next guy we got to talk about, Kenneth Gainwell, probably the biggest riser throughout the 2025 season, a guy that had just kind of been looked at as this complementary piece, but my goodness, probably increased his asking price tenfold with what he did last year. So is there a better landing spot than Pittsburgh? Because I think that we probably see the Steelers retain him. He just makes so much sense in this Aaron Rodgers offense. Or do you think he's a guy that's going to hit the free agent market and get paid elsewhere?
We'll see how much money he wants. New Orleans seems like if there was a spot, you got Alvin Kamara. I believe he's still in Cancun. I don't know. Alvin Kamara. I don't know what his interest is in going forward, but certainly they would need someone to spell him. But also, it seems like Gainwell might, career high 73 passes, make a great change of pace in New Orleans. So we'll see. I'm with you. I hope it's the Steelers. That makes the most sense. But we'll, there's been some talk there. Like Aaron Jones going to be a cap. They've told him he'll be released. Is he going to be of interest to the Steelers if they miss out on Gainwell, or would he be cheaper than Gainwell? Maybe that makes a difference to them.
Absolutely. And then that'll be one to watch. I think that his pass blocking also is one of the reasons that he works so well in Pittsburgh. When you have an immobile, aging Aaron Rodgers, you like to have a guy back there that can help keep him upright. Next year, we're going to talk about J.K. Dobbins and one of my favorite running backs. Like, just when he is healthy, I think he's a top 10 running back in the league. But Bob, 6 years in the NFL now, has never played a full season. Do you think we're ever going to see it? Like, I hate to use the term injury prone because there's experts out here who study this and say nobody's injury prone. It's just a fluky thing. But we got 6 years of data here where J.K. Dobbins hasn't been able to stay healthy. It's starting to feel like maybe he's a little injury prone.
I'm injury agnostic. I tend to give everyone a fresh start every year unless they have a chronic injury. And it's fair to wonder, chronically injured and chronic injuries are two different things. He has been undoubtedly chronically injured. It's great when you can get him. So I'm still in on drafting J.K. Dobbins, regardless of landing spot, based on the price. So, if you drafted him last year, the times he played, he gave you, far easily returned on investment. And so I'm probably still willing to take a chance on him for all the reasons you said, mostly because he does look like a top 10 back. He looks as good as anybody. And you just kind of bake in the risk. You're getting a discount because of it. You have to mitigate it when you draft. You maybe need a little more depth at running back or need to have a plan in place or whatever it is. But he's somebody I will take a chance on.
Last guy we want to talk about, and there are a lot of running backs still available. We could have done an entire hour just talking
Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, Rico Dowdle. We're not talking about him. We're not going to talk about Isaiah Pacheco. There's a lot of other names out there, but we gotta keep this show from being a 4-hour show here. So the last guy that I decided I want to talk about, Najee Harris. Fantasy managers have just written this guy off for dead. Like, he has just been a joke in the fantasy community, and I don't really understand why. And we talked about Matt Waldman a few times on the show. I know Matt Waldman sees it as well. Like, he is a good NFL running back. He mitigates losses. He moves piles. He accelerates into contact. All the things that we want to see. But getting up there in age, coming off the Achilles injury, I don't even see people talking about Najee Harris, but we're seeing guys now come back from these Achilles injuries looking like they never missed a beat. And that was an early season injury. We expect him to be ready for the start of the new year. Do you think that, this is a guy that is going to get a little bit of interest in the free agency market, or do you think that his window may be closing in the NFL?
I think somebody will be interested. He'll get opportunities, and Gus Edwards was still getting opportunities,
right? Yeah.
So there's going to be and not to compare. Obviously, I think he'd be a better option than a Gus Edwards type player, as Gus was at the end of his career. So yeah, and I think he'll be a guy that we'll all have on our waiver wire watch list if he has a landing spot. I don't think anyone will be drafting him next year or this year, but he is a guy that and I've talked to Matt about him as well, and Matt's really a booster in terms of just what he does, but it's hard to argue. The numbers tell the story when, up to last year, he's been as solid a fantasy producer as you could expect. And I was surprised the Steelers moved on from him. I was surprised when the Chargers invested as highly in a running back as they did when they had Harris. And so we'll see what the future holds for him. But I think he can still be a contributor to an NFL offense.
And for your dynasty managers out there, you could probably get Najee Harris for a 3rd-round pick right now. Like, I don't think anybody wants to have Najee Harris in dynasty. Just given the pedigree, the type of player he is, the footwork, the nuance to his game, his ability to press blocks and all that sort of stuff. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if we still have another 5-6 years of Najee Harris being in the NFL, just continuing to find out a role. You talk about Gus Edwards. I think that's kind of a perfect, he is a higher drafted, he's Gus Edwards with 1st-round draft capital. These guys don't just disappear in the NFL. I'd expect that he's going to find a place to play this year and will probably remain a part of an NFL team for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So we'll wrap up on Najee Harris there. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time today. We'll be back again next week once we have actual things to talk about. Everything we guessed today that is going to happen, none of it will come to fruition. We get to talk through a fresh lens next week, talking about where these players are, what our expectations are for them. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back Monday with Joey Wright, Wednesday with Jeff Bell, and then Friday again with Bob Harris. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you soon.